And we are live. I'm Paul.
Hey, and I'm Adam. Thanks for joining us on the Here's the Deal podcast, everybody.
That's right. And we're lucky enough today to have with us Bryan Chavis, best-selling author, smarter guy than me, real estate entrepreneur, property management wizard. And we're looking forward to kind of sharing our story with Bryan and sharing with out there what he does and how he can help you out. So Bryan, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. I'll give a little story about how we know Bryan. I was driving my children down to Orlando on an unbearably long trip one Christmas. I think it was a Christmas, only a year and a half ago, so not that long ago. And listened to a guy's book who I don't know from a hole in the wall. His name, I think, was Bryan. Was it Chavis? Who knows?
But anyway, paid for the book, so I answer to all of those since you paid for the audio book. So
right.
Call me
so
call me.
So I'm listening to this book, and it's got a ridiculous amount of content, and just the guy that wrote it just seems like a super nice guy. So I used fancy Facebook, and I find the guy, and I reach out to the guy, and then I think about 2 months later, Adam and I flew down there to hang out with Bryan, and we've been hanging out ever since. So Bryan, thanks so much for everything you've done. And why don't you tell people?
And Paul, what we'll do properly, like real podcast hosts, is mention the name of the book and how Bryan's had great success with it. That's helpful.
Thank you.
God, up in them tails, always be closing.
Broke if it wasn't for Adam.
So I think maybe we read the Landlord Academy first, but then obviously Buy It, Rent It, Profit is your big book, Bryan, in the Library of Congress. And why don't you just tell people a little bit about the deal behind being a big-time author? How'd that happen?
That happened, let me see, that happened in the early 2000s. So the Yankees were in town. Back then, A-Rod was buying up a lot of apartment complexes, Alex Rodriguez. And then a teammate of his wanted to kind of get involved. I had a friend that I was working with, raising money with, was boxing at the time. His name was Winky Wright. He was in the height of his boxing powers at the time. He introduced me to a guy named Gary Sheffield, which was a friend of A-Rod's, the teammate, and he wanted to get involved with real estate and commercial, and so we kind of got together, and I guess nowadays you call it one-on-one coaching, right? You call it, everyone has a coaching program, including myself. But back then it was, let's go out, let me show you how it's done, and take you to a few properties, and just spend a lot of time. We just spent a ton of time together. Then one day, I don't even remember like exactly how it was, but we were in the car. I don't know where we were going. We might have been hanging out and having a few drinks, and he was like, again, I don't know exactly how it happened, but he was on the phone with his agent because he was working on the book called Inside Power, I believe it was called. And he was on the phone with his literary agent. And then his agent wanted to get some more background about what he was doing life after baseball. And he was saying, I'm actually with, one of my guys now. We're talking real estate. And the guy was like, real estate, that'd be interesting. I'd like to talk to him and get an idea of, like what he's doing for you and so on and so forth. So this agent I ended up talking to, getting on the phone with him. And then he was like, well, wow, you sound well-versed. Do you have any books yourself? And I had this manual that I was selling out of the trunk of my car, $250. I was selling it from real estate organization to real estate organization, I had no clue what I was doing. As far as now everybody's a guru. Everyone is social media, but back then it was like, you went to a RIA group, you got in, you spoke, you had something to sell. And, I had this procedures manual that I sold because basically it was the same procedures manual that I was using to manage 3,000 rental units. At the time I had 3,000, roughly on average around 300 some odd apartment units in each community. And so I just basically used the same systems that we were taught and trained on in the multifamily industry and wrote my own procedures manual to help these landlords, because these landlords had no clue what they were doing. And it's still kind of back then is the same thing that's
Not
going
much
on
has
now.
changed.
It's like, yeah, they they get involved with real estate, but they don't really understand how to run it like a business. And from the multifamily industry, it is very much a business. It's all procedures, manuals, operating manuals, training individuals, and then staffing. After you train, then you staff and put them in their position, and they have to then learn how to run and maintain from these procedures manuals that you create. So everything that we did in the multifamily industry was based upon operations, procedures manuals, and training. And so all I did was just mimic what, how I learned, and wrote this book and gave it to landlords for $250. Kind of my marketing was for the price of a security deposit, that you charge for security deposits or whatever.
Yep.
Here's $250. It's going to save you out of trouble. It had leases, has everything, just like with buying, rent, profit. So the guy was like, man, that sounds like one heck of an interesting manual. $250 is what you're selling for out of the trunk of your car. How many do you sell? I said, well, I probably sell about 50 a week. Guy was like, you got to send me one. So I send them, I FedEx it. Vigliano and Associates was the literary agent out of New York, big time. Obviously, if they had Sheffield, it was a big time agency. So I sent it, never really thinking of anything. Then Winky fought, I believe it was Tito Trinidad, probably about.
It's going back in time.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to pull it all together. About 2 months, after sending it, forgetting it all about that, forgetting that I sent it. Winky 2 months later was fighting in Vegas. After the fight, I remember I was staying at, I believe, either Caesar Palace or the Bellagio, and I go down to the pool to have breakfast, and I'm chilling at the pool. I'm up early because obviously I'm from the East Coast, so I'm an early riser anyway. But everyone's asleep. The pool is empty. There's just staff and things of that nature. So I'm having my eggs, my egg whites, and my nice little my little breakfast. Then the cell phone rings. Pick it up, and it's this guy, Vigliano. He's like, hey, man, this stuff is really great. This is a huge buzz in our office. We really love this procedures manual. When can you get to New York to talk to us about it? I'm like,
let me finish these eggs.
What? I'm like, well, I didn't know. I'm like, who are you again and what? I had forgot all about it. And he was like, this is, you sent it, your Gary friends of Gary Sheffield, so on and so forth. I'm like, oh, yeah. I was like, well, when do you want me there? He's like, can you be there? Can you be here tomorrow or later tonight or something like that? He said, and I'm like, well, I'm in Vegas right now. The fight was last night. I think it's Sunday at this time. I'm like, I can probably be there at the beginning of this week. He's like, all right, well, we'll send for you. How about being here tomorrow evening? And so I flew from Vegas to New York a few days later, I think the following day, and the rest was history. Sat with them, spoke with them, and they kind of shot me around to other publishers. Probably about 4 or 5 publishers came across around November. We had to fly back a few times, So
nice.
After the 3rd or 4th visit, sat with Simon & Schuster, and they basically outbid everyone else, and the rest was history. And that's how Buy It, Rent It, Profit was created. Basically a distant or short or close relative to this manual that I was riding out of the truck, selling out of the trunk of my car.
3-ring binder. Yeah,
it is, right?
Yeah.
Man, you know what? I think, hold on. When we pause, I've got one. I always keep it.
Oh, nice.
Back. Someone heard me speak at some convention, and they were like, I bought one of your original manuals. I'm like, oh, how much will you sell it back to me for? So I won't tell you how much I paid for it to get it back, but I bought one of the originals, and I keep it with me. But that's just as a reminder. But yeah, that's kind of how that was born. And that book then took off. It was actually born during another crisis called the credit crisis in the early 2000s, and so I'm very familiar with understanding how to maneuver around recessions and launch products and services around that time. And Simon & Schuster decided to launch it at that time, and ended up making itself to the U.S. Library of Congress. I think it's the only book on real estate, definitely property management and asset management that's in the U.S. Library of Congress today. So I went on to become a bestseller, and you can pretty much find it anywhere, any bookstore. So it's always cool to take your kids into the bookstore and have them go find Dad's books. So
yeah, it's fun.
That's cool.
So for those following, if you want to become an author, you find yourself in a car with a major league baseball player or other athlete, and
right.
if you don't know any, not sure how else you can get it published. But no, that's awesome. What a story.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was. The main thing is at the end of the day, it's where, I think everybody who's skilled, there's going to come a point where any of your listeners are going to have an opportunity where some unique paths cross. And the main thing is that I was ready. So, it's never really, and I know we're just saying it in jest, but, for your listeners, it's really not about worrying about meeting someone of influence or having that point. The focus is making sure that you're always ready, because it doesn't matter who you meet if you're not ready to step up and be ready to have that opportunity. Because, I can tell you stories about how Mark Willis, which is a greater story, I think, than the Gary Sheffield story, how I came across and meeting Mark Willis. That was because of a failed business opportunity that I had at Keller Williams, trying to sell them on property management in the early 2000s when they were really anti-property management. That's how, me pitching this panel of Gary Keller, Jay Pappison, who wrote the Millionaire Real Estate Investor with Gary Keller, and The One Thing and all that. So, it's him, Mary Tennant, and Mark Willis as a CEO or COO at the time. I think he was a CEO at that time. And, they ended up not going with my pitch at that time. But that's how the relationship was developed with Mark Willis, to where we're doing real estate transactions to this day and raising money with Mark on the multifamily side. So, it's just really always being, you're going to have opportunities to be in front of individuals. It's whether or not have you been prepared,
right?
And have you been honing your skills and developing your skills. That was one thing that I was always doing, is honing my skills and developing them. And so when preparation met, I guess, what you call opportunity, I was ready to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and obviously that manual took a ton of time, and that happened over years and if not decades. Why don't you go back to before you could write a book or a manual? How did you get started, and where did you see the opportunity, and kind of what steps did you take to get to where you were ready, if when you got that call?
Yeah, so for most of your listeners, no one's gonna want to work 15 or over 2 decades, almost 20 years in the multifamily industry to learn this. Mine came from a failed opportunity. I was playing basketball. I went overseas. I played and tried to have a career stateside, like everyone. Father time and opportunity. Being 5'11" at that time and a scorer, there weren't too many people doing it. So your phone wasn't ringing off the hook. So you just kind of had to you had to play overseas and bounce around. And obviously the game changed when a guy named Allen Iverson came into the league. Kind of opened up opportunities for people that are my size to kind of get various different looks. A much more serious look, but it's like everything in life. Timing is everything. It wasn't my time. I was a little bit ahead of him. Not trying to put myself in that category.
Why not? Let's do it.
But
I could throw a football over that mountaintop.
You can't toot your own horn. Then who else?
Yeah, who else? That's right. Your mother and yourself.
I was nice. I was I can hold my own. At the end of the day, again, opportunity, found myself, without a job. And my father was like, look, you got to go find some work. You can't hang around here. So I'm in the backyard, and, a couple of tragic events happened in my neighborhood. And my dad's like, look, you got to get out and you got to go find something. And if it ain't going to be basketball, then you got to come up with something. So I'm like looking through the newspaper, and I come across this advertisement for, live on site. Work. I'm like, this is a perfect gig for me. I can live on site and work. Because my car was a Volkswagen Jetta, 1988 Volkswagen Jetta. I had to jump to get it started. And so I was like, yeah, my car's always breaking down. This is a gig where I can work and live in the same place. And so I faked a resume, sent it out, went to the unemployment office, faxed it out to a bunch of apartments. Got some callbacks. Back then, you were in the newspaper. Yeah, advertisement. Looked at the advertisement, got some callbacks, and got into the multifamily industry and you know, worked in the industry for several years, and that's kind of how I got my start.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, it's great. That's a really good example. You know, people don't see challenges for as opportunities a lot of times, and I mean, I think it sounds like you obviously took that challenge, and maybe it wasn't the ideal thing. It wasn't necessarily something you were dreaming of doing, but then look what you've made out of it, right? You know, so it's great.
Yeah, you know, and that's absolutely right. You know, it took a while being in the industry to really figure out, well, wow, there's you know, this is something, there's something here. And it took me years. I leased apartments, and really didn't, you know, think nothing of it. Just did it because it was a job. You know, had a good time on the weekends and hung out. You know, just really wasn't paying much attention to the industry. And then when I got into management and acquisition, and I started seeing the money and realizing and reading the reports, and like, wait a minute, you know, started doing the math in my head. I said, this is how do I get on the other side? And that's when I started doing the research, and, you know, one thing led to another. And I thought getting there would be writing this book and selling this. And, you know, because I didn't have two nickels to rub together. So I thought I would get rich selling this book and out of the trunk of my car. And that's how I would raise money to start my first, you know, back then where syndications wasn't the buzzword, but start my own partnership and raise money and buy apartment complex that way. So I was naive, to say the least, but it put me on this path to where I am today. And obviously, you know, all the things that I've done and overcome, property management and having these skill sets have been the thing that has allowed me to rebound, you know, after having a brain tumor and pretty much losing everything. It was the property management skill sets that have allowed me. And that's where you guys kind of met me, as I was coming back and being reintroduced when the world probably thought I had died. Being reintroduced and coming back out and stepping into the forefront, you know, and realizing, you know, of course, the landscape was no longer looking the way it did when I was selling the book out of the trunk of my car. Now there's an expert on every corner, a boot camp around.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
Calendar date.
And people don't even read. People don't even read anymore. It's got to be a video or
don't read anymore. You know, they go on social media. Now you can start a Facebook group, talk about the industry, and just simply talk about it and be an expert without having any really experience, any kind of resume. You can just build a brand and say, hey, look, you know, I'm talking multifamily, so now and it took me a minute to adjust because, you know, it's like any old school veterans, you know, when you come into the league, you got to pay your dues. You know, no one wants to, you know, you know,
the old chiseled vet.
Yeah, there's a reason why your boy out in Cleveland gets hit a little harder, that quarterback. You know, you get all these accolades and you get all these commercials and you haven't paid your dues yet. The veterans are like, wait a minute. Right. So, you know, it's kind of the same way, you know, with people that I know that, you know, that was kind of, it rubbed me the wrong way to see a lot of what I've been seeing. Because a lot of, you know, unfortunately, a lot of it, you know, and you guys know as well as I do, a lot of that stuff out there is watered down or diluted or really not that accurate. And, you know, people, but, you know, again, if you have a good looking brand and you know,
that's right. Get your picture in front of a nice car. You know, that's all you need.
Yeah. Or you can pose in front of a car or be on a jet. You know, then you gotta look credible, or you gotta know what you're talking about, a multifamily, or stand out in front of an apartment building, or say, hey, look, I got a, you know, sorry, there's people calling me. They got a, you know, I've written this ebook, or I've got this group, or I do this boot camp, and you know, you're an expert, and you know, so you just it took me a minute to sit back and watch, and realize what this new landscape looked like. And to make some adjustments myself, and you know, and that's kind of when we met, and where I was making those adjustments and things of that nature. But you know, it's interesting. These are very interesting times.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to, like, you have a unique relationship to the real estate industry with the realtor kind of industry. You know, like you learned a lot, met a lot of people, earned some money. Working on giving continuing education as kind of a feather in the hat. So Can you tell people kind of how that worked for you, how you were training people property management, and what you're doing now?
That is such a great that's such a great point too.
I
didn't even think about
that's
that.
all I do. That's all I do.
I mean that there's a reason why. I just thought he just was the pretty.
I'm not just gorgeous.
He's just not a pretty boy, Adam. He's actually got some
gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
So here I am selling this. Even now, going back 20 years, I'm selling this book and manual out of the trunk of my car. And even then, at these real estate investor club meetings, I'm like, wait a minute, this stuff, what they're saying, doesn't quite add up to what really goes on in the industry. And so I was like, I don't know if I don't necessarily feel like I need to sell a product or I just didn't feel at home. But I wanted to educate. I was a CAM instructor, certified apartment manager. I spent 9 years as an instructor as a CAM instructor for the National Apartment Association. So I was immersed in curriculum. That's all I really knew is curriculum, and how to structure it the right way. So then I wrote my own certification courses, but they weren't well received in the investor community because they weren't really interested in certifications and training, not like they are now. So I then pivoted towards the real estate professional industry, i.e. brokers, real estate agents. And so that is when I started a company, and that company, Landlord Academy, which now has morphed into the multifamily matrix, which we'll talk about later, developed and wrote curriculum, designed and I have tons of certification courses in property management, asset management, underwriting, you name it, finances, accounting. And I got all those approved by the state of Florida. And then I was on a tour where I would give lectures at universities and real estate associations throughout the state of Florida and sometimes outside the state, and provide these training courses and these materials. In fact, we're doing one, on the 13th for the Real Estate Association of, I believe, Palm Beaches. And so we're actually getting back into training real estate professionals because I believe that, they want to know about the syndication business as well. And so now I'm reintroducing courses and training and things of that nature, back to that crowd again. It's kind of how I did that for 7 years. Kind of really actually probably a little longer than 7 years is how I really built up the curriculum and the training and the certifications that I'm kind of now putting out there in the marketplace right now for everyone to consume.
That's really cool, man. And like I said, that's unique. I mean, obviously a lot of folks are putting on live events and you end up leaving with, a lot more knowledge and you're excited about the industry, but it's a win-win if you're a real estate professional and you also can get some continuing education. No one really goes after that. So I think that's a really cool, and it's an easy way to get people in the door too. So
yeah, it's a certification too. So we do offer certification so they can get an annual certification and designation and use, which I really think for our syndicators moving forward is going to be a requirement with the adjustments that I believe that you're going to see, with our lenders. When you look at the industry, I believe lenders are going to be asking for a little bit more higher standards from our syndicators, a little bit more. I understand you got a Facebook page. I understand you got a pretty brand, but we're going to need to see a little bit more. We need a little bit more convincing on the operational side because things are not going to be as easy as they once were. So they're going to be looking for a little bit more of a seasoned individual and more of a someone at the helms that really understand what it takes operational. So having designations and certifications, I think, are going to be something that you're going to see lenders require a lot more of. And not just any certification, but someone that is, that offers some sort of training that has some sort of state certifications or state CE approved courses. To be able to validate you as a syndicator and operator moving forward. You're going to see a lot more lenders require education and training out of their operators.
Yes, sir. I agree. Because right now it's, the adjustments that are being made in this new kind of economy are, hey, you got to bring more money to the table. But, it's going to go beyond that. I think I don't disagree that it certainly is a nice feather to have in the cap. If you have an acronym that something's been accomplished, and I and here's what I've
especially
done.
raising
So,
money.
yep.
So you're going to have a lot of guys who've raised money over the last maybe 8 years.
Yep.
Let's just say the last 3 to 5 years, you got a lot of people who've raised money, a lot of gurus, a lot of experts, and I think they benefited from a market. Not that they were actually great operators, but I believe they benefited from basically the market doing so well.
Sure.
And now you're not going to be able to, I don't think, piggyback on a market that performs so well that it hides a lot of the mistakes that you make from the operational level. And so you're going to see lenders now, again, wanting to hedge their risk and require a lot more education and training, a lot more screening of their syndicators and their borrowers moving forward.
Yep. I like that.
Nice. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about some of the things that go into being successful in property management. You mentioned, it's a lot of systems, it's a lot of process with property management. Can you talk a little bit about, outside of just that process, some other things that help, drive success in property management that folks might not realize? It's, it obviously is big. You got to have your systems, be organized, run a tight ship. What else do you think is a big factor in success on a multifamily project?
Well, I think you kind of hit it. If you really want to be successful at the multifamily level, it's all about operations. And operations are really divided into two systems: hard systems and soft systems. Hard systems are the procedures manual, and the soft systems are the property management software that you have. So understanding how those work uniquely together. Assuming that you've developed the right type of management plan in the beginning as a syndicator, general partner, or investor. The key is to make sure that, hey, listen, in the beginning, you understand that there's a management plan in play and that management plan has been developed while you're underwriting. And when you're stepping in at day one, the operator, the property manager understands, the asset manager understands what needs to go on. Right now, you see a lot of people buying and then plugging a property manager in place. And again, I've never been an advocate of that. Hey, just buy a multifamily investment property and then find a property manager in the area and then let them manage it and run it. No, that's you don't raise millions of dollars and then say, I'm going to hand it over to a property manager. To me, that's just not, there's a ton of issues with that philosophy. So I would like to see syndicators, investors, really understand the skill sets of an asset manager, and from the asset manager position, develop the management plan. And then the management plan will then, if you want to use a second party property management company, then you hand them your management plan and say, okay, this is how I want you to operate my property. Not allowing someone to dictate and tell me how they're going to operate my property, because at the end of the day, you're the general partner, you're the partner, it's up to you to come up with the management plan, hand it to the property manager if you use second party. And then that is going to be pretty much the Bible on how you operate. And then so procedures, manuals, and things of that nature that happen day to day will basically be a relative of that management plan. And then the procedures manuals then begin to develop in certain stages. The framework begins to develop in certain stages based upon what is said in that management plan. And then everyone understands how to execute. So it's very similar to putting together a game plan for a professional football team. Each team, you have a different game plan. You have an overall arching system and a philosophy that everyone buys into, but each team you prepare for a little differently. And it's the same thing. I can have 15 properties, but each property's management plan is going to be slightly different because I'm dealing with different prospect tenants, different branding, different location. Each property has its own branding. Each property has its own prospect tenant demographic that I'm tapping into. And so therefore, the operations day to day are going to change slightly based upon, what has been identified in that management plan.
Yep. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. People don't hit it from day one, like you said.
Well, no,
I think management's a thing where you just drop it
here's
in.
the thing. Everyone just focuses on underwriting. and markets.
Yeah.
Because that stuff is easy to talk about. I mean, you can sell plenty of tickets to a boot camp talking about what's the hottest market. And I mean, that stuff is fun. That stuff is exciting. I'm right there with a lot of people. That is fun to talk about. But if you think that's multifamily investing, you got another damn thing coming. That is not that's just one aspect. There's at least 5 major phases: acquisition, implementation, stabilization, growth, and an exit strategy. The whole underwriting process and evaluating markets, that's just the acquisition phase. That's just one out of 5 phases. You've got to master 4 more to really be successful.
Yeah.
Not just
no,
one.
yeah. And when we connected up, that first time back in Florida, I was like, dude, everyone's talking about the acquisition, but the problem with just focusing on that is, oh shit, now what? When you actually do take it, when you take it down, the real work is, after due diligence and close happens. So,
but the thought was, Paul, the thought behind that was you just hand it to a third-party property manager.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? When the shit hits the fan, that third-party property manager is not the one going to be sued.
Yep. And they still get paid.
Partner.
Yeah. I mean, they're still getting paid too. Yep.
Yeah. So if I invest money into your project, I'm not calling the property management company saying, where's my money? I'm calling you as the general partner saying, hey, where's my money? Things have gone wrong. We're not calling the property management company. It's not the property management's job to tell you how to operate your investments. So at the end of the day, that's where I think, again, a lot of the signals of, it sells and puts a lot of butts in the seat because it's sexy to talk about that. But that is just one aspect of the multifamily industry. And if you think you're going to come in here, and the problem is, here's the main problem. The main problem is because of the way the market has been, it's made a lot of people who don't know much about operations. It still makes them look good because you can make a ton of mistakes in multifamily. And because of the market and the critical mass, the economies of the scale, you can hide a lot of your mistakes and still look like a genius at the end of the day. But when the market changes, you'll get to see who's swimming naked here now that things have some changes have been made. So it's not going to be as easy just to sit back and say, hey, look, it's all about evaluating and then underwriting and then talking about underwriting, as if, you really understand how to make the adjustments in underwriting, but not really understand the operations, because the underwriting and the adjustments that need to be made at the underwriting level are dictated from operations day to day. So if you don't know operations, then you can't make the adjustments in your underwriting and your assumptions properly.
Yep.
If you don't really understand who your prospect tenant demographic is and how that's going to be affected. So,
No, and I think if we learned anything from this pandemic is that no one looks as good swimming naked. So
no.
I think just no one does. Just nobody does. Maybe Adam. One of the most interesting kind of viewpoints I think that I gathered from your books was this CIOTA process and taking more consideration on who a prospect tenant is, kind of understanding what they're looking for and how that'll help with, one, the underwriting when you're taking it down, but two, how to increase those rents and some of the things you need to instill to get that going. So can you talk a little bit about CIOTA, how you came up with that and what that means?
I have no idea. I think I came up with that in the shower. I was doing
drunk, maybe. Yeah, that's good.
I was doing an interview. You guys remember Harry? We met Harry.
Yeah, we met Harry. Yeah.
And Harry has lined up with one of my partners back in the day. Harry had lined up some interviews, and I was doing an interview on NBC, and I think it was CNBC, On the Money at the time, and they said you should use acronyms. The lady that they hired to help me with my publicist was teaching me how to talk to TV. It's like, you can't tell your stories the way you tell them. They're great stories, but you only have 90 seconds. So you got to make
Same here.
Create acronyms. So, how do you explain the real estate industry and your evaluation process? They made me break it down. So I came up with CIOTA, strategic evaluation of a target area, that kind of explained how you take apart an area demographically, psychographically, how you evaluate employment, how you evaluate the overall market and the health of that particular economy and forecast from there. And then, then how do you drill down and develop your framework, and then, select assets from there. Then you begin the underwriting process. So yeah, SEOTA stands for strategic evaluation of a target area. It involves the study of building permit activity, household income, average household size, unit mix, mortgage interest rates, demographics and psychographics. Demographics tells you who the prospect tenant is. Psychographics tells you the why. So it's compiling all this information and research, and then being able to make moves, because it's like you get the reports from CoStar. You can have reports from CoStar, and those can be very useful. But I've seen people look at reports and really not understand what they were looking at, right, and how to disseminate and then create a plan, a framework on how to attack your SEOTA process by looking at the reports that they were given from CoStar or Marcus and Millchap or CBRE. So just because you can have access and you paid X amount of dollars on a monthly basis to get those reports, a lot of people are staring at them. In fact, somebody asked me a question on social media and they were like, "What do you think?" And I explained what I thought, and they were like, "That is the real question." I'm like, "No, the real question is I've actually answered it to you, because if you really understand how to evaluate," and then I talked about the SEOTA process, then you would understand how to look at these reports and make decisions. Because people are like, "Oh yeah, we're going to have to make certain decisions in 90 days. And I'm like, "Yeah, you are, but you're also going to be late, because I've already made a lot of those decisions within 90 days. I'm just watching to see how these tea leaves are being read and how certain things are being played out. But I kind of already know what my strategy is. Sure. I don't have to wait 90 days to kind of figure out what that strategy is, because I've already looked at these reports and been able to pull, by using the SEOTA process, being able to pull the information and understand what demographics are going to be influenced the most behind these unemployment rates reaching 20%. Who is that going to affect? What demographics are that going to affect? What prospect tenants are going to suffer? Therefore, if the prospect tenant suffering or the current tenant base is suffering, what is the impact is that going to have on certain values at certain property types, asset types? And then those are the areas that I'm targeting, asset classes that I'm targeting, to see, where my opportunities are. And then you have to understand that not all those deals are going to be great, because just because you see someone suffering, it doesn't mean you want to pick that up, because you can probably get it for, a slight discount, because right, that demographic still is suffering. So you can buy that property, but if that demographic is still struggling economy-wise, and how the economy is going to be moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years, then, you don't necessarily want to bank your investment on a struggling demographic. Yep. You want to kind of, pick and choose opportunities where you're getting slight discounts on demographics that you still will see opportunities for growth.
Sure. I think you call that the catching a knife or something, right?
Catching a dropping knife.
Yeah, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. So, no, man, that was great. So what we do now in this portion of the show is we take a look at social media posts, and we stole this podcast called Hans, but we pull up a social media post, we show it to you and the tens of thousands of viewers, and you just talk a little bit about what the picture's from, where it is, and give some insight. So I'm going to share this screen over here, and it'll show up, and you'll see. Yeah, now it's cool. It's easy. So here's one from 62 weeks ago, February 22nd of 2019. It's probably not all that far off from when we connected up. Correct. But can you tell us what we're looking at here, if you can see? And let me give some background of the photo and what it means to you.
So you're seeing a perfect example of value add. You're seeing a property that I felt still had a ton of potential, but the value add was in the mismanagement of the asset. And so paying what some people might have thought was market wasn't really me paying market. I was paying for what I called an insurance policy, forecasting that we would be in a recession. Of course, not COVID-19, but we would be in some sort of recession, and that I wanted to bank on an asset that I was confident in the market, and I was confident in the demographic and psychographic of that prospect tenant. And therefore, if I slightly overpaid, or what people thought was overpaying, I didn't think in my mind that, number one, that I was overpaying, because I knew I can add value immediately to the curb appeal and to the management, as you can see from the before and after, and increase revenue through just simple operations, number one. And number two, if I slightly, what people might have considered overpaid, it was because I was overpaying for what I could consider the insurance policy based upon where the property was located. Therefore, a recession causing a softening in the rental market, higher vacancies, that I would rather be in the middle of downtown St. Pete in this location. And you guys have actually stayed at this property when you come to visit Florida.
That's right.
You know the property and the location and where it's at. So in a nutshell, this is what I'm doing now post COVID-19, looking for opportunities just like this, from which will be presented more of based upon the wake of COVID-19. You're going to see opportunities where it's going to be giving individuals more opportunity to buy at a slight discount, but more so buy based upon the ability for the investor to buy a value add play, but the value add play coming more from operations. Whereas people look at value add a lot as if you got to find a property that's hugely discounted. What I did, I knew the property was hugely discounted, but it was there all in assumptions. It was there in how much can I get increased curb appeal? How much can I get by doing a moderate upgrade to the units? And then that was the value add. And because no one has done that in this market, no one pushed the rents probably in the last 3 to 4 years until I came into the market. And I pushed the rents from the weighted average, I believe, was roughly right around 820, 830. And I came in and pushed the rents all the way close to 1,000. And so, and then of course, before COVID-19, I was getting, as you guys know, right around 1,100 for studios in that area. And then have since had to soften a little bit due to the market, not so much because of the demographic, but because of my competitors offering 1 month free rent, etc. You know, I've had to soften slightly, but at the end of the day, May, I told you guys in one of your posts, May was going to be the real mark. If I could share my screen, I would show you I've collected all of May's rent. So
that's big, man. Nice.
Am I exactly?
Wow.
Was I crazy, or was I crazy like a fox? That's the question.
Maybe a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Absolutely.
No, that's good, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I mean, and what you'll find in Bryan's books, and what, you know, if you follow him on Facebook and YouTube and stuff, is you'll see that he does very subtle improvements, but it adds a lot. You know, one of the things I remember was adding little mats in front of every apartment door. Like it seems stupid, right? And it's, you know, $12 a mat. But yeah, no, I mean, it made a huge difference. Yeah, it made a huge difference. So simple stuff like that. So
you just got a ticket.
I got a real.
He just got a ticket.
I got a ticket here. Here's anybody looking for a great property. I want you to come in here and smile.
We gotta share that commission.
Come here, smile.
Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
This is a great realtor who's out here hustling. This is a great property, if you can see, in Florida. So if any of your many hundreds of thousands of viewers are looking for a place in Florida,
this is one of the beauties of.
Yeah, they can.
Now we're talking.
Neighbor. Did you hear that? Yeah,
you could get free content.
$1,000 markup on that price.
That's a lot of free content you can get from the neighbor. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Yep. See you later.
No, that's good, man. It's the beauty of live television. We get total strangers to pop in. Adds a little more. Hey,
these realtors are hungry.
That's right.
Right.
Literally and figuratively. So, yeah, man, I think, you know, we really appreciate you coming on. One last kind of thing is, obviously we talk about a lot of real estate, and that's kind of what we live and breathe. But is there any other type of deal you're focused on? Obviously, you've improved your health over the last couple of years, which has been huge for everybody. Is there anything else? Like, what's your deal outside of real estate? What do you like spending your time doing?
Really, man, you know, that's a great question. I mean, for me, it's really been, it's been rough, because not too many people know that aspect of my, you know, really what it took to come back, you know, after having a brain tumor, and and then transitioning, and then, and then figuring out how to walk and talk again. And then, being a life of an entrepreneur going, oh, wow, I've had to sell off assets because I didn't have insurance. So I had to sell off a lot of my personal assets and make a lot of adjustments personally. And then to get married soon after, and start a family, it's been interesting. But I think, for me, the biggest thing has been, I haven't really had a chance to develop a ton of, interests outside of my family.
Right.
I've got I got a 2-year-old and I got a 5-year-old, and to me, they just are the joy of my life, and that's really who I am and what I do. I mean, life was basketball and sports, and of course, you guys know I'm a golfer. So if I have anything, it's golf. But I don't really have, anything overly excited like, what I do in the multifamily industry. I've been hugely blessed to have great friends that you guys kind of already know. People like Mark Willis, former CEO of Keller Williams, Andrew Wright, CEO of Franklin Street. I get to play golf with a lot of these guys, and a guy named his name, he used to be a huge Wall Street guy and buy and sell businesses.
Mitt Romney, cool. I can't believe it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mel Kippinger. You can look him up. The guy is older guy, genius. So now I kind of get to play golf with these guys. Golf is my main thing.
What about the Pro-Am? What are we doing about this Pro-Am?
You mean the U.S. Open?
Yeah. I guess it's not
been
Pro-Am.
postponed. So the qualifiers are, they've been pushed back, and so they're putting out notices about it. So I stay practicing. So I do that 3 or 4 days a week, constantly, practicing, and really that's what my life revolves around. And then now, getting back and building this brand, and the coaching and consulting business has picked up. More than ever. The multifamily matrix, we're launching 2.0 of that coming in the next couple of weeks. Man, this is just, those are the real exciting things right now. So that's really what, one day soon, when things get, when the brand gets where it's at and we're doing our conventions, you guys are coming out speaking, and we're having, then we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that story of what it took to face down a brain tumor, what it took to kind of, steer that beast in the eye and come on the other end of that. That's a whole nother book and a whole another story.
That's another whole podcast. That's right.
That's a whole different story that we'll get into at another time.
It's good, man. Yep.
But I appreciate you guys, though. Let me give you guys a shout out because, we've talked about, a lot of noise out there. But you guys are definitely practitioners, and definitely individuals that I admire. I greatly appreciate. I call brothers, but we've had a lot of opportunity to break bread together. And again, you come to Florida, and you stay at my places. Don't do that for everyone. Hell, there's probably family that's probably going to see this on social media.
That's right. Really? Free play?
Yeah. You're going to have targets on your backs. But
that's right.
I'll give them your email. They can take it up with you. But, ultimately, it's because you guys are really good individuals, man. You guys have always been solid. You're well-versed. You're well-educated. And you guys have done a lot that people don't know about to help me out. And as I was coming back into this industry, and you guys have been there and done a lot that again probably won't get talked about, but I feel compelled to let people know who you are as individuals, more so the brands that you see being built. And so I'm just greatly appreciative of you guys and who you are and the principles that you guys stand on.
Love that, man. Cool, man. Yeah, very nice. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're happy. We're blessed to be hanging out and doing this silly podcast. And I mean, everybody can find you at bryanchavis.com. See all the good stuff you got going on. Multifamily Matrix, check it out. Subscription.
Buy the Block podcast, please.
Yes, do that right now. Subscribe. All you tens of thousands.
Buy the Block podcast. Please.
Yeah, no, it's great. Brian's got access to all these discounts, so you're part of the Matrix and all sorts of great stuff. So give that a hard look. It's a bargain. And man, thanks so much, brother.
These two clowns will be in the Matrix as faculty. So
that's right.
So If you like
that's
them,
worth
then you'll
that's
love
worth
The
it.
Matrix.
That's the best sell right there. You know, I mean,
There you go. Enough
All right.
said.
Thanks, buddy. Always good
Thank
hanging
you,
out.
guys.
We'll be in touch.
Be
Thanks,
blessed,
Bryan.
guys. Take care.